Web3 is kind of a catch-all term for things having to do with decentralization and tokens and crypto and NFTs and so on. And I don't think anybody really knows what they mean. Although Packy McCormick and Chris Dixon threw up a pretty good definition where I'm paraphrasing now, but it's something like Web3 is where it's owned by the user and controlled by tokens. Or as I used to say in my old speak when I used to talk about blockchains replacing networks with markets, that these are systems and protocols and companies that are actually run by markets underneath. So it's not a true democracy where every user is equal, but user influence is weighted based on how much value they've contributed to the network. And they could have contributed that value either by putting in money, which is tokens, or by putting in time or code or security, like mining for Bitcoin and so on. So Web3 is sort of this decentralized, user-owned, token-voted, token-controlled web. And I don't think it's necessarily going to replace everything in Web 2 wholesale. Like, is it going to just replace Twitter and Uber and Amazon and Facebook? That's too simplistic of an extrapolation. That's just not how the internet tends to work. Those old things tend to stay the old way, but then new things come along that are completely different, that are unimaginable, that can only be enabled by the new paradigm, and then eventually they completely obsolete the thing that came before. We don't even think about using it. For example, eBay was like a Web 1.0 product. So is Craigslist. eBay and Craigslist haven't been replaced at all. They still do the things that eBay did, and Craigslist still does the things that Craigslist did. But Airbnb came along. There was one tiny little category in eBay that is now just a whole different app that was enabled by mobile. Or Uber came along and just replaced taxis completely. Or Facebook came along and social networking was unimaginable. It replaced bulletin boards, but bulletin boards still continue to exist. It's just Facebook took over all the mind share. So I think that Web3, the same way, is going to create its own brand new apps that are not going to directly substitute for the Web 2.0 apps, but they will be so different because once we break down this idea that economy and markets and money and games and ownership and social networks are silos that are supposed to operate separately from each other. Once they sort of start munging together into one thing, we're just going to enable a whole new class of applications that are just unimaginable today. And those will take our mind share and our time and our money to such a level that the old apps will still continue to exist, but they're just going to be much smaller in scope and they're just going to capture much less of our attention. So I can't necessarily predict what those applications are going to be, although you can see, Web3 started out in finance. Because when you decentralize, if you can decentralize money, you can decentralize anything because money is the hardest thing to protect. So if you can say, I can have a distributed group of anonymous users allocate money and govern money, then they can actually govern anything. And so we started with money, and you can already see for users who have been using decentralized finance, aka DeFi, on top of crypto, all their mind share is there. Like they're not going to go back to playing with their bank or on Wall Street or trading stocks or even GameStop or what are the Wall Street bets seems amateurish to them because they're just in a much more advanced financial marketplace. So I think we've already seen it happen in DeFi for a certain class of users, and I think we may see it with something like whatever NFTs are headed towards and whatever the online crypto games are headed towards. But it's very, very hard to figure out exactly what that extrapolation will be. So when we say Web3, it's a little glib. It implies that it's a direct successor to Web2, but I don't think it so much replaces Web2 apps with Web3 apps, but I think it just creates a whole new set of apps that then end up taking all of our time and energy and resources. I'm not sure if that answers your question at all, but I was just kind of reacting to the terminology of Web3 to 2.5 to 2.0.
Oh yeah, definitely did. It gave me a lot to think about. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.